The dust motes danced in the late afternoon sun streaming through the bedroom window, painting warm stripes across the mahogany dresser my wife, Chloe, had inherited from her grandmother. I was alone, or so I thought, tasked with the simple job of retrieving her grandmother's pearl necklace from that very dresser. The house was quiet, a stark contrast to the usual weekend bustle. Chloe was out with her mother, Sarah, at a gardening show, and I'd stayed behind, claiming a need to catch up on work emails. The truth was, I needed a moment of stillness. Lately, the air between Chloe and me had grown thick with unspoken words and missed connections, a slow leak in a tire you don't notice until you're listening to one side. My hand was on the cool brass handle of the top drawer when a floorboard creaked behind me. I jumped, spinning around. David, you scared me. My father-in-law, David Miller, stood in the doorway, his large frame nearly filling it. At 65, he was still an imposing man, a retired civil engineer who carried the quiet, solid assurance of someone who had built things meant to last. He wore a simple flannel shirt and jeans, his hands slightly dusty from puttering in the garage. "Sorry, Ethan," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Didn't mean to sneak up. Saw the car and thought Chloe might be here." "Just me," I said, forcing a smile. "Grabbing the pearls for tonight." He nodded, but instead of turning to leave, he stepped into the room, his eyes scanning the space with a peculiar intensity. The bedroom, our bedroom, suddenly felt too small, too personal with him in it. He walked over to the window, looking out at the backyard he knew every inch of. "Beautiful afternoon," he murmured. Then, after a beat of silence that stretched too long, he said, "Everything all right with you, Ethan?" The question was casual, but the weight behind it wasn't. David had never been one for small talk. He was a man of measured words and deep observation. "Sure," I said too quickly, shutting the dresser drawer with the necklace in my hand. "Just work stuff. You know how it is." "I know how distance feels," he said, still not looking at me. "Even in a room full of people. Even in a marriage of 40 years. The directness of his statement winded me. I stood there, clutching the pearls, the facade of fine crumbling under his gentle, perceptive gaze. This was the man who had welcomed me, a shy software developer, into his family 8 years ago. He'd taught me how to properly season a grill, how to read a topographic map on our hiking trips, had shaken my hand with a firm, approving grip when I asked for Chloe's hand. We had a good relationship, but it was one built on mutual respect and a shared love for his daughter, not on intimate confession. "It's that obvious?" I finally asked, the words escaping like a sigh. He turned from the window. "Not to everyone, but I've seen the way you look at your phone when she's talking. The way she makes plans for weekends without checking with you first. It's not anger. It's drift." The accuracy was terrifying. It was a drift. A gradual, inexorable pulling apart by the gentle, relentless currents of routine, career pressures, and unmet expectations. We weren't fighting. We were politely coexisting. "I don't know how to fix it," I admitted, the confession feeling both dangerous and relieving. "I love her. I just feel like I'm losing her, and I don't even know what beach she's washing up on." David gestured to the small sitting area in the corner of our bedroom, 2 upholstered chairs by the fireplace. "Sit," he said, not as an order, but as an invitation. "If you want." I did want desperately. I sat, and he took the chair opposite, the afternoon light now catching the silver in his hair. "What you're describing," he began, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees, "isn't a storm. It's erosion. And it's the most dangerous thing that can happen to a marriage, because you don't see it happening until the ground gives way beneath you." He paused, looking into the cold fireplace. "Sarah and I, we hit a point like that years ago, maybe 20 years into our marriage. Chloe was in high school, and we were just roommates. Cordial, cooperative, utterly lonely. I couldn't imagine it." David and Sarah were the bedrock, the couple who finished each other's sentences, who held hands under the table at restaurants. "What did you do?" I asked. A faint, sad smile touched his lips. "We made a choice. One night, in this very house, we decided to stop being polite. Politeness was killing us. We started being honest. Brutally, terrifyingly honest. Not to hurt each other, but to find each other again." He looked at me, his blue eyes clear and intent. "That's what we did in the bedroom," Ethan. Not what you might think from some salacious title. We fought. We cried. We unpacked 40 years of baggage, right there on the rug. We admitted resentments we'd nursed for decades. We confessed fears we were ashamed of. I told her I felt invisible in my own career. She told me she'd felt abandoned when her mother died, and I buried myself in work. It was the hardest night of our lives. He let that hang in the air. The image was so far from any infidelity, it was almost laughable. This was an infidelity of a different kind, an infidelity to the truth, to the raw, messy reality of their shared life. The next night, David continued, we did something else. We started from scratch. We pretended it was our first date. We asked each other the silly, profound questions you ask when you're trying to fall in love. What's your biggest dream? What are you most afraid of? What does the perfect day look like to you? Now, at this age, we realized we didn't know each other anymore. The people we'd married were gone, replaced by these two older, weary strangers. We had to get to know them. He stood up and walked to our bookshelf, his finger tracing the spines of Chloe's novels and my tech journals. Love isn't a static thing you find and put in a display case, Ethan. It's a living thing. It needs to be fed, watered, repotted. It goes through seasons. You and Chloe are in a winter. It feels barren, but the roots are still there, if you're willing to dig through the frost and tend to them. His metaphor resonated deep in my bones. But how do I start? How do I even begin that conversation without her thinking I'm accusing her, or that I'm unhappy because of her? David turned. You don't start with "we have a problem." You start with a question, a single, honest question, and you listen, not to respond, but to understand. And you have to be willing to answer the same question, with your whole heart, no defenses. He came back and sat down. Do you want to save your marriage, Ethan? Truly? Not just preserve the peace, but save it, rediscover it. More than anything, I whispered, the truth of it overwhelming me. Then you have to be brave enough to be vulnerable. And you have to do it consistently. Not just one big talk, 100 small, true moments. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn notebook. Sarah and I, after that night, we made a pact. Every Sunday night, just for 30 minutes, we'd sit in our bedroom, no phones, no TV, and we'd talk. Sometimes it was about the big things. Sometimes it was just, what made you smile this week? Or what's a worry you're carrying? We called it our root watering. It saved us. He tore a blank page from the back of the notebook, took a pen from the bedside table, and wrote something down. He handed it to me. It read, Chloe, if you could relive one day from our past together, which day would it be, and why? Start with that, he said. Tonight, when you give her the necklace, look her in the eye and ask her, and then tell her your answer. The simplicity of it was disarming. It wasn't an attack. It was an invitation back into our shared story. We talked for over an hour, there in the quiet bedroom. He shared more of his own stumbles, his own moments of fear and failure as a husband. He didn't position himself as a perfect sage, but as a fellow traveler who had walked a similar, longer path and found a way through the thicket. He spoke of the importance of appreciation, of the corrosive power of unspoken gratitude, of the necessity of carving out sacred, uninterrupted time in a world designed to fragment attention. It was the most profound and intimate conversation I'd ever had with another man, and it happened not in a bar or on a golf course, but in the sanctum of my own marital bedroom. The infidelity here was against the silent agreement to let our marriages slowly die. We were being unfaithful to apathy. I heard the garage door open. Chloe and Sarah were home. David stood, placing a heavy, reassuring hand on my shoulder. Remember, son, courage, and listen. He gave my shoulder a squeeze and left the room, heading downstairs to greet his wife. I sat there for another minute, the pearl necklace cool in one hand, the scrap of paper warm in the other. The room felt different. It was no longer just a place where two tired people slept. It was a potential space for renewal. That evening, as Chloe got ready for the dinner party, I fastened the pearls around her neck. Our eyes met in the mirror. You look beautiful, I said, my voice slightly thick. She smiled, but it was her polite, public smile. Thank you. Did you have a good afternoon? I did, I said. I talked with your dad for a long time. Her eyebrows raised in surprise. Really? About what? About us. I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. I took a breath, my heart hammering. He gave me a question to ask you. Okay, she said cautiously, turning to face me. I pulled the paper from my pocket, though I already knew the words by heart. If you could relive one day from our past together, which day would it be, and why? She stared at me, the practiced smile gone, replaced by genuine shock. Then her eyes softened, grew distant as she traveled back. A full minute passed in silence. The day we got lost, she said softly. On our honeymoon, in that little rental car in Tuscany, we argued over the map. We were hopelessly late for a reservation. We ended up in some tiny village at sunset, sharing a panini on a stone wall. We didn't have a plan. We were just together. It was perfect. Tears welled in my eyes. I remembered the frustration melting into laughter, the feeling that as long as we were lost together, it was an adventure, not a mistake. Mine is the day we painted our first apartment, I said. We were covered in sunshine yellow, you had a smudge on your nose, and we ordered pizza and ate it on the floor because we had no furniture. We were building our home, together, with our own hands. It felt like we could do anything. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. She wasn't crying from sadness. It was recognition. Why are you asking me this now, Ethan? Because I miss us, I said, the vulnerability terrifying and freeing. And I don't want to just be roommates who love each other. I want to find us again. She stepped into my arms, and we held each other, truly held each other, for the first time in months. It wasn't a magic fix, but it was a start. A first, honest stitch in a frayed seam. That Sunday night, after David and Sarah had left, we began our own version of root watering. We sat in our bedroom, the door closed against the world, and we talked. We used David's questions, and then we made up our own. Some nights were easy and full of laughter. Others were hard, touching on old wounds and current frustrations. But we kept showing up. We were being unfaithful to silence. Weeks turned into months. David would sometimes check in with a quiet, "How's the watering going?" And I'd give him a thumbs up or share a small victory. Our bond deepened in a way I never expected. He became more than a father-in-law. He was a mentor, a guide through the complex terrain of committed love. One evening, about 6 months after that pivotal afternoon, Chloe and I were hosting a family dinner. Sarah was helping Chloe in the kitchen, and David and I were setting the table. As I placed the forks just so, I looked at him. "Thank you," I said, my voice low, "for what you did for us, for what you told me that day." He paused, a stack of plates in his hands. "You did the work, Ethan."